Today, let me begin with repeating a few of the solved problems from the last time, and then we would continue solving the remaining problems on DC generators. As I was mentioning last time, the key to solving problems on DC machines and even AC machines is to draw the equivalent circuit first accurately and then apply circuit theory and the basic knowledge about the operation of the machine. This particular problem says a 25 kilowatt, 125 volt separately excited DC machine is operated at a constant speed of 3000 revolutions per minute with a constant field current such that the open circuit armature voltage is 125 volt. The machine is observed to be acting as a generator with a terminal voltage of 124 volt and a terminal power of 24 kilowatt. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So what I have started doing is looking at a problem, a solved problem on DC generators. The idea is that once you read the problem carefully, you draw the equivalent circuit first and then apply circuit theory along with the knowledge of the basic principle of operation of the machine. This philosophy works for AC machines also. In fact, even for transformers, we did the same thing. So this particular problem is in front of you. Hope you can read it. It's a very faint scan. It's a DC generator, which is separately excited. That means the field windings are being fed independently using a DC source, and armature is totally independent. The output rated power of this generator is 25 kilowatt, and output rated voltage is 125 volt. The speed at which the machine is operating is 3000 RPM. Now, the machine is actually operated with 24 kilowatt instead of 25 kilowatt. That means a little bit lower than the rated value of the output power. Okay. And the voltage, the output voltage is also slightly lower than the rated value, which is 125 volt rated. And actually, we are operating at 124 volt. That is what is given to us. The armature resistance is 0.02 ohm. Calculate the speed of the generator. So it's a separately excited case. Number one thing you have to do is draw the equivalent circuit very carefully. And note down all the information given to you on the left hand side or right hand side, wherever you want. Okay. Back EMF is 125 volt. That is the case in which the machine is not connected to any load. So the output voltage of the generator will be same as the back EMF, which is 125 volt. Actual voltage, when you connect the load, drops to 124 volt. So you can see that the regulation is 125 minus 124 divided by 124 and the result multiplied by 100. That much percentage voltage regulation is there. It's quite small, which is good. Armature resistance is given to us as 0.02 ohm. Okay, now let's see. They want us to find the speed when the machine is loaded. When machine is no load, has no load, it is operating at 3000 RPM. That's given to us. Okay. So what you do is look at case one when nothing is connected to the output, open circuit load. Back EMF is phi ZNP by 68. That's the well-known equation. And left hand side is 125 volt, obviously. You don't have to know phi Z P A separately because this is a machine call. Phi into Z into P divided by 60A is actually a machine constant as long as phi is not changing, and which is what I think has been given to us. It's a separately excited machine, so phi is being maintained constantly at a particular value. So you put the value 125 on the left side, and on the right hand side, n is known as 3000 RPM in this case. So you can calculate the machine constant phi ZP divided by 60A using this information. That machine constant turns out to be 1 divided by 24. That's open circuit load. Okay. Now in case 2, we have loaded the machine and the output power has gone down slightly. It is 24 kilowatt and output voltage is 124 volt. It's all given to us. So you divide the wattage by voltage to get the output current under loaded conditions. You get 193.55 amperes. A has been cut off in scanning, sorry for that, but you can make it out, I'm sure. Okay. So in case 2, if you look at the equivalent circuit carefully, when I is not 0, that means case 2, the back EMF EB will be V plus IARA, simple KVL. Okay. And V is 124 volt. I has been calculated in case 2. RA is known. So we should be able to calculate EB in second case as 124 plus 193.55 into 0.02. So EB in second case turns out to be slightly higher than what it was in the first case. Now, we know EB in the second case, we know EB in the first case, right? EB is slightly higher in the second case compared to the value in the first case. So N has to be slightly higher here compared to 3000 RPM because rest of the things in the equation are not changing. So what you do is take the value of phi ZP divided by 60A as 1 upon 24 and reuse the equation. 127.82 should be phi ZP divided by 60A multiplied by N, which this N means the second value of N after loading has been done. And then you solve the resulting equation. So the RPM under loaded condition turns out to be slightly higher than 3000. It is 3068.9 RPM. That's what this problem is all about. Question 2. A 4-pole DC generator has a wave-wound armature. Okay, remember, for wave-wound construction, number of parallel paths, capital A, is equal to 2. For lap-wound construction, number of parallel paths, capital A, equal to number of poles. This is something you should remember. The total number of conductors is 792. The flux per pole is 0.0121 Weber. Determine the speed at which the generator should run to generate 240 volt at no load. That means EB is 240 volt. Okay. It's a straightforward application of the well-known equation. EB is given, phi is given, Z is given, P is given, A is given. So you calculate N. And the value turns out to be 751.3 RPM approximately. If it were a lap wound generator, then A and P would cancel each other. Then the result will be different. Okay. Question 3. This is what I think we did not do in the previous lecture. A DC generator, when driven at 1000 RPM with a flux per pole of 0.02 Weber, produces an EMF of 200 volt. If the speed is increased to 1100 RPM and the flux per pole is reduced to this, okay, then calculate the new EMF. It's simple again. In first case, suppose the speed is N1 and flux per pole is phi 1, then EB1 equal to phi 1 Z N1P divided by 60A. Keep in mind that Z, P and A don't change. They are fixed for a given machine. But you are changing phi and N in two different cases. So this is equation 1. And in case 2, similarly, you write equation 2. So it is obvious that EB2 divided by EB1 is phi 2 N2 divided by phi 1 N1. And then the values are given to you. Phi 2 is 0.019 Weber, phi 1 is 0.02 Weber, N2 is 1100 RPM, N1 is 1000 RPM. So EB2 upon EB1 is 1.045 approximately. So EB2 will be EB1 multiplied by 1.045 volts. And EB1 is 200 volts. So plug in all the values. The second back EMF turns out to be around 209 volts. This one, a shunt DC generator delivers 450 amperes at 230 volt and has RA, that means armature resistance, equal to 0.03 ohm and field resistance equal to 50 ohm. Calculate the generated EMF assuming lossless brushes, and in part B, assuming that the voltage drop per brush is 1 volt. So the first thing you do is draw the equivalent circuit correctly. It's a shunt wound machine. So this is the equivalent circuit. Armature is shown as a circle with EB written inside. Two brushes are shown at the top and at the bottom. Armature resistance is in series with the armature. And then the field winding is connected across the armature. And the output is also taken across the armature. Obviously, the armature current IA will be field current IF plus load current I. As I have been mentioning, in many books you will see load current being denoted by IL or IT, that means terminal current. And same thing about V. They may call it VL or VT. I'm avoiding those suffices. I'm simply calling them V and I. Okay. So first equation is IA equal to IF plus I, ACL at the node. And second equation is obviously EB minus IARA equal to V. And the third equation is V divided by RF equal to IF for a shunt DC generator. These are the three equations. So you are given the value of I as 450 amperes and V as 230 volt. So IF should be easy to figure out. It is 230 volt divided by 50 ohm, which is 4.6 amperes. So IA will be IF plus I. So 400 ampere plus 4.6 ampere. Sorry, 450 ampere plus 4.6 ampere. So armature current is 454.6 amperes. EB will be V plus IARA. Do the calculations after that. Back EMF turns out to be 243.64 volt approximately. In part A, this is the answer because we are ignoring the voltage drop due to the brushes. In part B, we have been told that each brush produces a voltage drop of 1 volt. So the total drop will be 2 volt. So in part B, you make the appropriate correction. EB will be 230 plus 454.6 into 0.03 plus 2 volt, which is the additional loss, additional voltage drop due to brushage lossy behavior. So the answer in part A and answer in part B, they simply differ by 2 volts. That's it. No equations required. If by chance number of brushes is more than 2, then you will make appropriate changes. Normally we assume 2 brushes anyway. Okay. Now this one. Calculate the flux per pole required on full load for a 50 kilowatt, 400 volt, 8 pole, 600 RPM DC generator with 256 conductors arranged in a lap connected winding. So A equal to P. The armature winding resistance is 0.1 ohm. The shunt field resistance is 200 ohm. So it's a shunt wound generator. And there is a brush contact voltage drop of 1 volt per brush. Okay. I guess I have not drawn the equivalent circuit in this case, but it is exactly what we saw in the previous problem. This is the equivalent circuit. So first thing you do is calculate the total load current, which is 50,000 divided by 400 amperes, 125 amperes. Field current will be V divided by RF. V is 400 volt. RF is where is RF? Yeah, 200 ohm. Yes. So 400 volt divided by 200 ohm, that gives you IF, which is 2 amperes. So armature current, no, this problem is wrong. Again, there is a mistake here. I should have corrected it, I guess. Anyway, yeah, there's a mistake here. IA will be total of 125 and 100, total of 125 and 2. So IA will be actually, I'll correct it when I send it to you. IA actually will be 127 amperes. This, what is shown here is the case of a motor, not the case of a generator. So IA will be 127 amperes. Okay. And then EB, of course, is 400 plus 127 multiplied by 0.1. 0.1, I think, is the resistance of the armature. So the value for EB will come out from there. Okay. Sorry, I forgot to make this correction in this document. And after that, of course, the second part, which is flux per pole required. So that for that you apply the standard equation. Once EB is known, you apply phi ZNP divided by 60A. Everything is given except phi. So from there you calculate phi. Obviously, the value shown here is not correct. It will change a little. Okay. In part B, although it is not solved here, but what would happen is this additional 2 volt will come into picture. I'll solve part B also when I send you the document. So whatever result you got in part A for EB will change by 2 volt in the upward direction to get the new EB. And from there you will calculate phi again. Okay. So question 5 numbers are wrong, but philosophy is similar to what we did in the previous problem. Next. Yeah, this one is pretty easy actually. An 8-pole wave-wounded armature has 600 conductors and is driven at 625 RPM. If the flux per pole is 20 milliweber, determine the generated EMF. Simple calculation. EB equal to phi ZNP divided by 68. Phi is given as 20 multiplied by 10 raised to the power minus 3. Z is given as 600. I made a mistake here too. It's 625, not 600. So that also has to be corrected. Okay, fine. No, sorry. I think I'm okay. The number of conductors is 600. I'm okay. It is the value of n, which is 625. Okay, so that's fine. And P and A are also given. P is 8, A is 2. It's a wave wound machine. Okay, so plug in all the values. P is 8. You probably cannot see it, but it's easy for you to make these calculations. Okay, 20 into 10 raised to the power minus 3 into 600 into 625 into 8 divided by 60 into 2. So the back EMF in this case turns out to be 500 volt. Straightforward calculation. Okay. Now the next one is containing more similar but slightly more complicated problems. The armature of a two-pole 200 volt and wave wound DC machine has 400 conductors and runs at 300 RPM. Calculate the machine flux per pole. Okay, this is simple, I think. You are given EB 200 volt means open circuited voltage from the generator. So 200 volt is EB. Okay. Z is given as 400. N is given as 300. A is given as 2. Sorry, P is given as 2. And actually, A is also given as 2. Wave bound means A equal to 2. So P and A would cancel each other. You do the rest of the calculations. And from there, you figure out phi. It turns out to be 100 milliweber. This equation, EB equal to phi ZNP by 60A, is central to the physical operation of the machine all the time. Problem 2. 400 volt, 8 poles, 600 RPM DC machine has 100 slots. Each slot contains 40 conductors. So the total number of slots is 400. Sorry, total number of conductors is 400. The flux per pole is 0.01 Weber. What type of winding is being used? Okay, good question. So your objective is to figure out capital A. If it is 2, then it's a wave wound machine. If it is 8, then it's a lap wound machine. EB is 400 volt, N is 600, P is 8, Z is actually, sorry, Z is 4000, not 400. Z is 4000. Yes. Okay. And N is 600. So plug in all the values and calculate A. It turns out to be almost equal to 8. So it's a lap wound armature. You may not get exact 8, but you will get very close to 8. So the nature of winding on the armature is lap, not wave. Another one, 100 kilowatt, 230 volt shunt generator has RA so much, RF equal to so much. There's a mechanical loss also here that makes life little more complicated for us when it comes to efficiency calculations. If the generator operates at rated voltage, calculate the induced voltage and the generator efficiency at full load and at half full load. Full load means full 100 kilowatt is being drawn. Half load means 50 kilowatt is being drawn. That's how we interpret load generally. The equivalent circuit is, of course, similar to what we drew earlier for shunt generators. The complication here is that we have mechanical losses also to worry about. Normally, so far I was ignoring mechanical losses. Okay, so how do we tackle this? Okay, these are various symbols. You know these already. Armature current is field current plus load current. We know that already. Field current is V divided by RF. We know this equation also. V is EB minus IA RA minus voltage drop due to the brushes, because brushes also have one minute. Yeah. Actual voltage coming out will be EB minus IARA minus 2, because brushes also have been assumed to be dropping 1 volt per brush. Okay, it's not written here in the problem, but I have assumed that. Okay, I'm being more realistic in calculations. Fine. So, including brushes lossy behavior, V will be EB minus IARA minus voltage drop due to brushes, if any. If there is none, then you ignore it. Now, first thing is to calculate load current, I, which is simply the total power drawn divided by the operating voltage. It's DC, right? So no power factor involved. Power factor is 1 actually. 100,000 divided by 230. That's the DC current being drawn from the load side. It turns out to be 434.78 amperes approximately. Field current is V divided by RF. So 230 volt divided by 57.5 ohm, which turns out to be 4 amperes. So armature current will be 434.78 plus 4. So 438.78 amperes. Back EMF, okay, in actual calculations, I've ignored brush drop completely. I've simply assumed V plus IARA. Okay. Because nothing is given to us regarding brush drop. Okay, fine. So you plug in the values, you get back EMF as 251.94 volts. That's, we are looking at part A, which is full load right now. Okay, so EB is known. Now, how about efficiency? Output power is obviously 100 kilowatt. It's a full load case. Copper losses have to be calculated, which will be IA square RA plus IF square RF. You know IA, you know IF, you know RA, you know RF. Plug in all the values. Double check my calculations, please. The total copper loss turns out to be 10546.39 watt. And iron losses are not given, so we will ignore them completely. But mechanical losses are given. So they have to be added to copper losses to get the total loss in the machine. which is the mechanical loss, 1.8 kilowatt, so 1800 watt. You take copper losses and add 1800 watt to them to get the total loss of power between output and input. So the total lost power is 12.34 something kilowatt. Input power will be output power plus loss power, right? This is what efficiency is all about then. Plug in the values, 100 divide, I'm writing values in kilowatts right now, in numerator and denominator both. P out is 100 kilowatt, P in is 100 plus 12.34, so 112.34 something. Take the ratio and multiply by 100. Efficiency at full load turns out to be around 89%. That was part A. In part B, output power drops by 50%. It is now 50 kilowatt, but we will assume that operating voltage does not change. So current would now be half of what it was in the previous case. The load current, I mean. 438.78 divided by 2. No, 434.78 divided by 2, which is around 217.39 amperes. Field current will not change even at half load because field current is determined simply by V divided by RF, no matter what the load is. So field current will be again 4 amperes as it was in part A. Okay. So total armature current now will be 217.39 plus 4 amperes. So 221.39 amperes. Now you repeat the same method. First you calculate EB, and I'm ignoring brush drop again. So EB turns out to be 241.07 volt. Then you calculate the copper loss, IA square RA plus IF square RF. Actually, IF square RF will not change. It is the same as in part A, but IA square RA will change. Total copper loss turns out to be 3.37 kilowatt approximately. It has gone down compared to part A because obviously you are operating at a lower output. And of course, mechanical loss will not change because the machine is still rotating at the same speed. Friction, windage, etc. will remain the same. So we will assume 1.8 kilowatt mechanical loss even in part B. Okay. So it would become 3.37 plus 1.8 kilowatt, 5.17 kilowatt. And then of course you take output power 50 kilowatt, input power 50 kilowatt plus 5.17 kilowatt, 5.17 kilowatt. So efficiency is 50 divided by 55.17 and you multiply the result by 100. Efficiency in this case goes up slightly. It is now 90.63%. At full load, it was 89%. This is typically the case. As load goes down, efficiency improves a bit. Okay. Problem 4. A lot of problems here. A shunt generator has a field resistance of 60 ohm. I think you should be able to handle it by yourself. This is based on what we have done in previous problems. So I'll leave it to you to go through this carefully. In case you have difficulty, you can contact me later. Let me move to this next one is also simple enough. You should be able to do all this by yourself. 6 also is about the same. This one here. A 4-pole lap-wound DC generator has 600 conductors on its armature. Fine. The useful flux per pole. Sometimes you will see the word useful flux per pole, not flux per pole. What it signifies is that not the entire flux produced by the poles is coupled to the armature. Some of it is leaked out through several paths. The leakage is undesirable, but it is there. So when they say useful, they mean they have excluded leakage. They are talking about the actual flux which is being coupled to the armature windings. So whether you see useful flux per pole or flux per pole, assume that you are looking at useful flux per pole. Leakage has been omitted from the number. So phi is 0.02 Weber. At what speed should the generator be run to generate a no load voltage of 100 volts? It's very simple actually. EB is given and you plug in all the values to figure out N. Very simple calculation. Okay. Next one is also not that difficult, I think. A 100 kilowatt, 250 volt DC shunt generator has RA so much, RF is so much. When generator operating at rated voltage, determine the induced EMF in the armature at full load. Yeah, I think this one is also easy for you to handle. You can go through it in detail. In case you have difficulty, contact me. Okay. So the rest of the problems I think in this document are not that difficult. They're more and more practice of what you know. This one is also not that difficult. It's a shunt machine and simple calculation again, I think. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you should be able to understand these solutions by yourself. Yeah, same thing here. Nothing new. I think will probably see if there is a complicated problem somewhere because that is worth looking at. Let's see. No, these are more of the same type. Again, it's a straightforward case of applying this formula. Yeah, this one is also not that difficult. Answers are given. Try them out yourself. This one is back to separately excited DC generator. When I was running at 1000 RPM, it supplied 200 amperes at 125 volt. Okay. What will be the load current when the speed drops to 800 RPM and field current is unchanged? Armature resistance is given and brush drop is also given as 2 volt, including both the brushes. This could be worth looking at. Let's look at it carefully. It's a separately excited machine. So the equivalent circuit is what you see here. At 1000 RPM, it supplied 200 ampere and 125 volt. Okay. Now it's a separately excited machine, so armature current now will be same as load current. So EB is very easy to figure out, including 2 volt voltage drop because of the brushes. EB turns out to be 135 volts. Now when N drops in second case by a factor of 0.8, that means it has dropped to 800 RPM now. EB would also drop by the same amount. right? Because EB is phi ZNP divided by 60A. Phi is not changing because you are producing the same IF in both cases. Okay, Z, of course, will not change. P will not change. A will not change. It's the same machine you are looking at. So only N is dropping by a factor of 0.8. So EB would also drop by the same factor in the second case. So it will become 135 volt multiplied by 0.8. This is the intelligent part that you need to be able to figure out. In second case, EB is going to be 108 volt. And in the second case, the load current is also different. Okay. Field current is unchanged, so phi remains unchanged. Fair enough. Okay, we need to figure out the load current in the second case. That is the question. Fine. Okay. One, to put out this line. Okay, the load resistance is not changing. So load resistance value actually is 125 volt divided by 200 ampere. So 125 divided by 200 and the result is in ohms. So load resistance can be calculated based on info given in part 1. Okay. So now V will be 108 minus 2 minus IARA. And V is also IARL, which IA is the new value of armature current. Okay. So what you do is IARL plus IARA. Yeah, you use the equations here. Put the value of V from equation 2 in equation 1. A bit of mathematical manipulation is required. So from there, you should be able to calculate IA. That's what I've done. And once IA is known, V is quite easy to figure out. Okay, so what did they want? Let me go back again. What will be the load current? Yeah, they want the load current in the second case. We have figured it out. It's 159.4 ampere. Write the proper equations first, carefully, and then solve them. In the second case, V is IARL, where RL is known from info in part 1, and IA is an unknown, of course. But we also know that EB is 108 volt, and V is supposed to be 108 minus 2 minus IARA. So these two equations need to be put together by eliminating V, and the resulting equation will be having only one unknown, which is IA. From there, it's easy to figure out IA. Rest of the problems, I think, are already done somewhere else, so I'm not going to waste too much time on this. Yeah, this we have already looked at in the previous document. I'm rushing because I need to move to motors. Most of these problems will not be that difficult for you. That's my belief, at least. But let's try 17 also. Yeah, this actually is a very important set of problems. Here we are talking about compound wound generators, which are actually more commonly seen in real life. Compound winding means part of the field winding is in series with the armature and the remaining part is in shunt with the armature. Let's look at these problems very carefully. Question 1. In a 110 volt compound wound DC generator, RA is 0.06 ohm, field windings shunt part is 25 ohm, and field windings series part is 0.05 ohm. The load current, the load actually consists of 200 lamps, each rated at 55 watt and 100 volt. These lamps are supposed to be connected in parallel. That's how the load is generally. Assuming a long shunt, calculate EBIA. Now I'll tell you what long shunt connection is. Compound winding is of two types, long shunt and short shunt. Long shunt means the shunt component of the field winding is placed later. When you begin from the armature side, you first bring the series component of the field winding, which is shown as RFSE, and then you put the shunt component, which is RFSH. Obviously, that goes in parallel. The total resistance of the field winding is RFSE plus RFSH. You are putting RFSE in series with the armature and RFSH in parallel. But the location of RFSH is after RFSE. That is what is called a long shunt connection. If RFSE were later and RFSH were in the beginning, we would have called it short shunt connection. These are industry words. So take it from me that long shunt means RFSH comes later and RFSE comes first. So the equivalent circuit for this compound wound generator is what looks like here. I have marked various currents also here. Armature resistance is RA. Series part of the field winding has resistance RFSE. Shunt part has RFSH resistance. Armature current is IA. Part of that current goes to the shunt field winding. I am calling that current IFSH. The remaining goes out as the load current, which I am calling I. The terminal voltage or load voltage is V, obviously, and load is connected, of course. V upon I will be equal to load resistance, in case you are interested in knowing the load resistance. Okay. So with this equivalent circuit in mind, let's see. V is given as 100 volt, that's for sure. Actually, yeah, I think, sorry about this. Actually, I've written 110 here, but it was supposed to be 100 volt. Okay, again, there is a typo mistake here. Question one should be 100 volt compound DC generator, not 110. Okay, so assume that the typo is taken care of later. So terminal voltage is 100 volt. The terminal current will be obviously dictated by no, sorry, okay, there's no typo here. The thing is, the machine itself is rated for 110 volt, but we are using it as if it is supplying 100 volt. Okay, so everything is fine here. No mistake at all. 110 volt rated generator is supplying 200 lamps which are rated at 100 volt. So we are being safe. We are not operating the generator at full 110 volt. Instead, we are operating it at 100 volt. Fair enough, nothing wrong with it. So V that we are actually using is 100 volt, not 110 volt. Fine. 110 volt is the rated value, which will be printed on the nameplate of the generator. But we have decided to operate it at a lower value of V, which is actually preferred from safety point of view. Okay, so nothing wrong here. Everything is fine. V is given as 100 volt, and you have got 200 lamps connected in parallel, operating at 100 volt. Each lamp consumes 55 watt. So total wattage will be 55 into 200. And that divided by voltage will give you the total load current. Load has 200 lamps in parallel. So 55 into 200, 200 lamps multiplied by 55 watt divided by 100 watt. Yes. So the load current turns out to be 110 amperes using this calculation. And of course, now look at the rest of the things. IFSH, looking at the equivalent circuit, will simply be V divided by RFSH. And V is 100 volt. RFSH is given as 25 ohm. So 4 ampere is the value of the field current in the shunt winding, in the shunt portion of the field winding. IA, that means armature current, will be I plus IFSH. You can see that yourself using KCL. So IA is 114 amperes. For compound wound cases, you have to do everything using logic. Questions are there, but they have to be written by you based on the situation that you are looking at. So I am going by using basic circuit theory after I have drawn the equivalent circuit. Armature current turns out to be 114 amperes. And EB will be V plus IA into RFSC plus IA into RA, right? If you apply KVL. And V, of course, is IFSH into RFSH. That's the second equation. We have already used it to calculate IFSH. So EB is this equation. And you do the calculation after that. I got 112.54 volt. I think I'm correct, but double check the calculations. Okay. Calculate EB. That is done. How about armature current? That we have already done. It is 114 amperes. That's it. Done. The important thing is to draw the equivalent circuit correctly based on what is given to you and then use KCL and KVL. Repeat question 1 with a short shunt connection. Yes, the second part is the short shunt connection. That means RFSH will come first and RFSE will come later. I'll show you the diagram here. In short shunt case, after the armature, you first see RFSH, then you see RFSE. So KCL and KVL will have to be applied in a different manner here. First of all, IFSH is not going to be equal to V divided by RFSH anymore because RFSE gets into the game now. So what I have done is what I'm going to show you carefully. First of all, load current will not change, okay? Because you are still looking at 55 watt multiplied by 200 and the entire thing divided by 100. Load current will still be what it was here, 110 amperes. In question 2 also it is 110 amperes. However, the rest of the story is going to be different. Look carefully. Write the equations carefully. EB is IA into RA plus I times RFSE, right? That's one equation. Equation 1. IFSH will be actually EB minus IARA divided by RFSH. That is also correct. And the third equation is IA equal to I plus IFSH. That is obviously true also. So we have got three equations. Our objective is to figure out EB and IA. Actually, I also is an unknown. So three equations and three unknowns. Let's put it this way. How do you solve them? Equation 1, V plus I. See, remember, I is, just 1 minute. I is related to IA and IFSH. So I'm going to use that. V plus I times RFSE plus IARA. And IARA will become IRA plus IFSH into RA, right? So I've done some manipulations here. EB minus IFSH RA will be I times RA plus RFSE plus V. And equation 2, of course, is there. EB minus IARA equal to RFSH into ISH. So equation 4 and 5 have the same thing on the left hand side. So I equate the right hand side now in equations 4 and 5. And that gives me a very interesting equation. You can go through the derivation. What I get by solving that equation is a formula for IFSH. You can double check whether this is correct or not. This is the formula I get for IFSH in case of a short connection, short shunt connection. And once I get the formula, the remaining part is straightforward. I plug in the values. V is known, RFSE is known, RFSH is known, I is known. So I get 4.22 amperes as the value of IFSH. And then, of course, other things can be calculated very easily. IA will be I plus IFSH. So 110 plus 4.22. So 114.22, no issue with that. And EB can be calculated also from one of these equations that we have derived already. So you can double check all the values here. Hopefully there is no mistake in my calculation. Short shunt connection analysis is slightly more complicated compared to long shunt connection, that's for sure. Okay. Now there are more problems based on compound winding, and they may be worth looking at. For the long shunt case considered in question 1, how will the ampere turns? Ampere turn, suppose a coil has 10 turns and it is carrying 1 ampere. Then the ampere turns will be 10. It is called magnetomotive force, MMF. So essentially, number of turns is not going to change in the coil. The ampere turns will essentially be proportional to amperes. So don't worry too much about this word ampere turns. Essentially, what you need to figure out is the ampere. Turns are not going to change. For the long shunt case considered in question 1, how will the ampere, let's say ampere, forget turns, how will the amperage or the current of the series winding change if a diverter of resistance 0.1 ohm is connected across the series field resistance? Okay, I'll go back to question 1. This was the case. Now, what they are telling you is that they are connecting a resistance called diverter, DIVERTER, in parallel with RFSE. That helps in optimizing the performance of the machine. I'll come to that a little later. So if I connect a diverter of 0.1 ohm in parallel with RFSE, what would happen? That's the question. This is one of the practical methods used to change the amount of field current in the series portion of the field winding. If necessary, we have to do this because that will change the flux produced. So this is a practical method. Diverter is a practical method for dynamically trying to control the performance of the machine. Anyway, let's look at the problem first. Yeah, this is done. Let's go back. Here we go. This is the diagram. You are connecting a diverter in parallel with RFSC. And the value of diverter is 0.1 ohm. All other values are identical to what we had in question 1. So how will the current going through RFSC change? Number of turns in RFSC will not change, it is the current. We need to figure out the new value of current in RFSC compared to question 1. So it's a circuit theory problem. Once you have drawn the circuit, once you have drawn the equivalent circuit, the rest is all KCL, KVL, and Ohm's law. How do we handle this? Look carefully. Now the parallel combo or combination of R dive, I'm calling it R dive, and RFSC. You know the value of R dive as 0.1 ohm. You know RFSC from question 1 as 0.05 ohm. So parallel combination of 0.1 ohm and 0.05 ohm, you can check it yourself, will give you the effective value of RFSC, which I'm calling RFSC with a prime symbol, and that value turns out to be 1 upon 30 ohm. So essentially, question 1 can be repeated here, but you change the value of RFSC from 0.05 ohm to this new value that I have calculated. Effective value of RFSC has changed now because of the diverter. Okay. Obviously, I would still be 110 amperes as it was the case in question 1 and question 2. IFSH will also not change. It is same as in question 1. IA would also not change. A lot of things are common to question 1. The only difference is when you come to RFSC. You have got two resistors now in parallel. So there will be a division of current here. Some current called IDIV will go through the diverter and the remaining will go through RFSC. I'm calling it IFSC, although I have not marked it here. But IFSH, I, etc. will not change. They are exactly what they were in question 1. Okay. So obviously, I dive into R dive should be IFSC into RFSC because of the parallel connection. Okay. Actually, the current going through RFSC is simply IA minus I dive. You can put it this way also. So IA minus I dive multiplied by RFSC should be I dive into R dive. Circuit theory. That's what I'm doing here. Okay. From there, I calculate I dive, the current going through the diverter, as about 38 amperes. Once that is known, IA minus 38 amperes will give you the current going through the series field winding. IA was 110 amperes, right? From there, you subtract 38 amperes, you get 76 amperes, I think. Sorry, IA was 114 amperes, my mistake. IA was 114 amperes. From there, you subtract 38 amperes, which is going through the diverter, and the remaining will flow through the series part of the field winding. So the current going through the series part of the field winding is 76 amperes. In question 1, that current was complete IA, right? And that was 114 amperes. So the current in the series portion of the field winding in question 1 was 114 amperes. In question 3, it has gone down to 76 amperes because of the diverter. As a result, the ampere turns will go down by 76 divided by 114 factor, which is in percentage about 66.67%. So the answer is that the turn amperage in the series part of the field winding will go down by about 66.67%. That means current will go down by that factor. They are just complicating your life by calling it ampere turns. Turns are not changing anyway. It's the same winding. It is the ampere value which is changing in the series winding. So the current in the series winding has gone down by 66.67%, gone down to 66.7% of what it was in question 1. Okay. You can repeat that problem with 1 volt per brush, etc. Try it yourself. It should not be that difficult. Okay. Now there's a note here which you may want to read with me. The diverter is frequently used to reduce current in the series field winding so that winding does not get too hot. This is the real life. If the series winding, which is carrying a lot of current, parallel winding is not carrying much current anyway. So not an issue. It will not get too hot. It is the series part which may get too hot. So you want to reduce the current going in it. That's why you put the diverter in parallel. That is what I'm telling you in the note here. Why diverter is practically significant. The diverter is frequently used to reduce current in series field winding so that the winding does not get too hot. The reduction in flux phi resulting from reduced current in RFSE may be easily compensated for by suitably changing RFSH. So what is happening is, this is the dynamic compound winding gives you a lot of flexibility. Suppose the series field winding gets too hot, you will put a diverter, which is already there. You will simply switch it in. That's it. Switch will be there already. You just turn on the switch. So a diverter comes into the game. That will reduce the current in the RFSE. So that will change the flux. That will reduce the flux. So EB will go down. But to come back to the same EB, you will increase IFSH by reducing RFSH, because IFSH is simply V divided by RFSH. So you in real life keep playing with RFSE and RFSH values to maintain the operation safe enough and optimized enough. Compound winding is always much more preferred compared to shunt winding or series winding, because here you have got flexibility to change RFSE and RFSH. In fact, you will put rheostats, okay, instead of fixed values, or you will put tapped register values to change values as you want. So that's why I thought I'll show you this problem, including the diverter. Okay, I think I'll avoid 18. Instead, 18 is more complicated, so I'll avoid that for now. If time permits, I'll come back to it, that problem set later. So far, what we have done is we have been looking at the generator, DC generator, very carefully. Theory is very important because it helps you in understanding the DC motor also. In real life, DC generators are not that popular anymore, but DC motors continue to be very popular. And that's what I'm going to start talking about in the remaining lecture today, and we'll continue. DC motors are constructionally similar to DC generators. That's obvious. Only thing is now input is DC electrical power and output is rotary mechanical power. Everything is reversed in operation compared to generators. A DC generator takes rotary mechanical power in and pumps electrical DC power out, whereas a DC motor does just the opposite. Simple enough, right? The construction is identical, virtually identical to what you saw for DC generators. And the methods of connecting field winding to armature winding are also either separately excited case or self-excited case. And under self-excited category, again, there is a shunt excited category, series excited category, and compound excited category. Classification is exactly what it was for DC generators. However, the analysis will be slightly different now. Even the equivalent circuit may have to be drawn slightly differently in case of motors for each of the field winding connections. And other important thing to notice is that now the performance measurement will be done in terms of many things that were probably not that critical when we spoke about DC generators. Like torque, what is the output torque produced in the motor? What is the speed? What is the power, mechanical power, rotary mechanical power? How do they change with load current? How do they change this? How do they change with that, etc.? So DC motors discussion you will see will take a path slightly different from what we saw in case of DC generators. But be aware that construction is virtually the same, and most of the equivalent circuits will be slight modifications of what we did for generators. For instance, if you look at a separately excited DC motor, you still have field winding being energized using a separate DC source. No change in that. Okay, I'm calling the field winding voltage as VF and the field winding current as IF and field winding resistance as RF. Exactly what I did for DC generators. Now, as far as the armature goes, now you are applying DC voltage from the outside, and that will start the rotation of the armature. The output is now a rotary mechanical power. Input is a DC electrical power. So VT, now I'm deliberately calling it VT because it is the terminal voltage that you are supplying to the motor to make it run. Now I'm consciously calling it VT. I'm not calling it V because I know it's the voltage you are connecting across the motor to make it work. And I'm also going to call the current going in the motor as terminal current IT. Lot of books call it IM, motor current, and VT sometimes will be referred to as VM, motor voltage. But I stick to my notations for now. VT is the terminal voltage applied to the motor. IT is the terminal current, which is the total current being drawn by the motor. In case of a separately excited motor, VT and VF are the two DC inputs. VF also is required, which may not be as high as VT, but it has to be supplied for sure. It is an independent DC input voltage compared to VT. The current going in IT, of course, in this particular case is same as the armature current. However, look at the direction of current. Now the current is going in the armature. In case of generator, current was coming out from the armature. So now Vt minus IaRa will give you Eb. In case of generator, Vt plus IaRa gave you Eb. You have to be careful. Now Eb would be lower than Vt. In case of generators, Eb was higher than Vt. Okay, because of the direction of the current. And of course, brush drop will still be either ignored or you will be given a value that you got to include in the calculation. Give me 2 more minutes and I think we'll stop after that. For a separately excited motor, for a separately excited DC motor, it is obvious that terminal current is same as armature current. And field current is obviously Vf divided by Rf. Armature resistance will again be denoted by Ra. There's no change in that. Field winding resistance will be denoted by Rf as usual. And in this particular case, Ia and It are the same. That's what I am writing here. The formula for EB continues to apply for motors also. Same formula applies because the machine is the same anyway. Okay. This formula remains valid for DC motors also. The only difference is now EB will be lower compared to VT. And of course, these things continue to apply. If you are given a motor with lap winding, then capital A is equal to capital P. If you are given a motor with wave winding, capital A equal to 2. That doesn't change. Now, for separately excited case, the formulas are straightforward. IF is VF upon RF, IA equal to IT equal to VT minus EB divided by RA. Okay. EB plus IARA equal to VT. So that can be rewritten as IA equal to VT minus EB upon RA. And output power produced by the motor, supposing we know it, and let's call it PM, that means actual mechanical power coming out. As I told you last time also, a related term to that power is the torque produced, and they are related by this equation. I think I did this last time also. Omega is 2 pi n divided by 60, where n is the RPM with which the rotor is rotating.